Okay, so that first video was numbers 1 through 4, so here we are picking up with number 5. And as you can see, this is a little bit more and a little bit more complicated than the first 4. However, we just have to remember our rules. And with this one, we have added parentheses. So our rules are as follows. 1, we have to eliminate the parentheses. And we always eliminate the parentheses by distributing whatever is out front. In this case, we have a 4. So we're going to distribute that -4 in the parentheses using our rainbow, if you want to call it that. And so we take the 4 and multiply, because when we're distributing, we're multiplying. So 4 times -4 is going to give us -16, and we can always double check that in our calculator. And then we take the 4 times the -7, and that's going to give us -28. But what we cannot forget about is that x. If you start with an x, or if you have an x involved, you always have to keep it. And so it's going to be -28x. And so since we haven't done anything at all to this left side, we just bring it down. So we have -3x plus 34 equals that -16 minus 28x. So after we eliminate parentheses, the next step that we have to do usually is combine like terms, which we just did on problems 4 and 5. But we can only combine like terms if they're on the same side as that equal sign. And so we do have like terms in the -3x and the -28x, but since they're on opposite sides of the equal sign, that's why I drew a line down the middle so you can see the left and the right, we cannot combine. So in order to get something on the other side of the equal sign, that's when we have to go back and remember that we have to do the opposite of it. So after we recognize that there are no combining like terms, the next thing we have to do is to isolate the variable. In other words, we need to get the x's on the same side. And so I always like to get the x's on the left. So I'm going to take the -28x or the -28x and undo that. And in order to undo it, you're going to have to do the opposite. So we're going to have to add 28x, not just 28, but the 28x, the entire term. And then what we do to one side, we've got to do to the other. And we have to remember that we can only add that 28x to the -3x because the x's are like terms. This 34 right here is just a constant. So it's just a number. We cannot combine a constant, just a number, with another number that has a variable. The variable makes them different. So then we're going to take the -3x and add that to the 28. So you can always use your calculator. So you get -28 plus, or I'm sorry, be -3 plus 28, and we get 25. So we get 25x. The 34 is also going to come down because we didn't do anything to it. The -16 comes down because we didn't do anything to it. But then the -28x and the positive 28x, that's what we were trying to do, is eliminate it, and that's what we've done. We've canceled them out. So now we have the variable x on one side of our equation. So we have 25x plus 34 equals -16. So at this point, if we want to get x by itself, the next step would be to eliminate the constant. So we cannot get rid of this 25 that's attached to the x until we get rid of everything else on the left. So we're going to eliminate the positive 34 or the plus 34 by subtracting it. They're doing -34. And then we have opposites. So those are canceled out. So now we have 25x is going to come down. And then we got to do the math to the right. So we have -16 minus 34. So we're going to go -16 minus 34. And we get -50. So 25x equals -50. Now when we get to this point, going all the way back to number 1 once again, we have a coefficient in 25. That number is being multiplied by x. So in order to undo that, we are going to divide by 25. And what we do to one side, we have got to do to the other. So the 25 over the 25 is going to cancel out. And so we now have that x by itself. I'm going to write that over here. And that x is going to equal that negative 50 divided by that 25. And that's going to give us negative 2. So x equals negative 2. And if we go back, that is choice B. So now that we've kind of explained that one a little bit, as we move on to number 6, we have to remember, once again, if we have parentheses, we got to eliminate it through distributing. So we have not done anything to the negative 14 or the 2n's. We're going to go ahead and bring it down. And now let's distribute the 6 to the n. And anytime we have a number getting distributed to a variable, all we do is smack it together. And so that becomes 6n. And then 6 times negative 1, which we can use our calculator, and we get negative 6. And then we have this negative 3n out here. We cannot distribute that 6 any further than the parentheses, because once we distribute to the end of the parentheses, it stops. So this operation, this minus 3n, stops our distributing, so therefore we're just going to bring down that negative 3n. So now we have negative 14 plus 2n equals 6n minus 6 minus 3n. So at this point, we do have like terms, and those like terms are 6n and 3n. And those are on the right side, so remember, we cannot combine the 6n with the negative 6 or the negative 3n with the negative 6, because these have a variable. And the variable is what makes them different, but it also makes the 6n and the negative 3n the same. So therefore, we are going to have to combine them, which means simply to add them. And 6n minus 3n is just 6 minus 3. So we get 3n minus 6. And then we still haven't done anything to the right side or the left side, so we just bring it down. So now we have negative 14 plus 2n equals 3n minus 6. So now we have to get the variables on the same side or isolate the variable. So I always like to move from right to left. So I'm going to do the opposite of this positive 3n here. And I'm going to subtract 3n or negative 3n. But what we do to one side, we also have to do to the other. So now we're going to have negative 14. Haven't done anything yet, so it comes down. And then we have 2 minus 3. We can still go to our calculator for that. I'm sorry, 2 minus 3, and we get negative 1, or negative 1 n. The 3n and the negative 3n cancel, so we bring the negative 6 down. So now, in order to get n by itself, we're going to have to eliminate that negative 14, and we do that by adding 14 or taking a positive 14. And what we do to one side, we've got to do to the other. So we get negative 1n equals negative 6 plus 14. Which is 8. And then our final step is to get rid of that negative 1. And once again, that negative 1 next to that n means it's being multiplied. So in order to undo that, we're going to have to divide by negative 1. And therefore, those will cancel out. We get n by itself. And 8 over negative 1 is just going to be n equals negative 8. And we can still do that in our calculator if you would like. 8 divided by negative 1, and it tells us we're going to get negative 8. So now let's look at number 7 here. So once again, we have to distribute. We're going to distribute that negative 8 to the 5 and also to the negative b. So when we do that, we have negative 8, and then when we distribute, we are multiplying. So negative 8 times 5 is going to give us negative 40. Please make sure you use your calculator for that. And then we have negative 8 times negative b. So although we are multiplying a number times a variable, and we are going to smack them together, we have to remember that a